Hey, and good morning, everyone. As you can see, the Southwest counter line is already busy. It's been busy since early this morning. About 2:15 is what time I got here to check in for the flight to head down to Havana, Cuba. The folks are wearing their Cuban hats, and they're all prepared. Have a big celebration that is going to take place a little bit later. Now, I had the opportunity to catch up with a few people in line to talk to them about why they were here and why they wanted to be a part of this inaugural flight. Had the chance to speak with a man who flew here to Tampa from Dallas, which, of course, is Southwest Airlines' home base. And for him, it's a very emotional moment because his father actually flew the very first Southwest flight back in 1971, and his father was from Cuba and had not been allowed to go back. And this is a moment for him to go back and show his younger sister as well the opportunity to get to see Cuba. So it's a very emotional moment for him.
Our father flew the first flight for Southwest Airlines on June 18th of 1971, Dallas to San Antonio. He was born and raised in Cuba. We lived in Cuba in the 50s prior to Castro. We had to leave and come to the States June 5th of 1960. So it's twofold. It's a return where I used to remember she was just shy of 10 months at the time. She was born August of 59, so figure the time.
So the flight leaves at 6:15. I'll have the chance to be on that flight, and I'll also be in Cuba for a couple of days and have a chance to talk to the folks about why they were here, what this inaugural flight means for them, the first commercial flight from Tampa to Havana, Cuba, direct flight. So it's exciting for all of the folks on the plane, and quite frankly, guys, it's super exciting for me, too. I've never been to Cuba, so I'm anticipating a lot and can't wait to be there. So I'll send it back to you guys.
All right, we're so excited for you, Rod. Remember, you can watch Rod's special coverage of this historic first flight right here on News Channel 8 throughout the day, starting with First at 4.
And good afternoon from Havana, Cuba. And you can see the vibrancy of this city has returned after those 9 days of mandated mourning in the death of Fidel Castro. Take a look at what I'm talking about here. You can see there are people throughout the streets, and you can hear music playing once again, and you can see the cars milling about, those great old cars that are here in the city. And it's a great time for the folks who came up from Tampa. And let me tell you, that inaugural flight on Southwest Airlines, first direct commercial flight, was full of people, and they had the same energy and feel that they have right here in this city as that flight took off.
You know, what I refer to a moment like this is just laying down another brick on a bridge that's rebuilding. Okay? And that's what it's all about. You know, creating that historic relationship that we've had for over 100 years.
And again, that inaugural flight, that first direct commercial flight from Tampa to Havana, Cuba, took off this morning about 6:30. It was supposed to take off at 6:15, but after a lot of pomp and circumstance, it finally got in the air. It's only about an hour flight, to be honest with you. It didn't take very long. And I'm telling you, the folks on that flight are extremely excited for the opportunity to just be able to come here. Of course, that's great news for Southwest, but it's really great news for the folks who live in Tampa, who have ties and family here in Cuba. That flight is much cheaper than the charter flights that they had to take before now, only about $149. So they're excited to have that direct service. We're going to send things back to you, and we'll have much more for you coming up tonight at 5 o'clock as well.
And now, Rod Carter's special coverage of a historic flight to Cuba. This morning, the first ever direct commercial flight from Tampa to Havana took off. 8 on your side's Rod Carter, of course, being on board that plane. And now he shows us what was waiting for him when he landed in the Cuban capital of Havana.
And good evening from Havana, Cuba. You know, this is the first time I have been to Cuba. So one of the things that struck me immediately, as it does a lot of people when they come here the first time, are these classic cars. Just absolutely amazing to see. Now, I got the chance to come here because for the first time, Southwest Airlines has direct commercial flights to this island nation. That flight this morning was absolutely packed. At TIA, the morning started with sounds of Havana. Passengers aboard Flight 3952 bound for Cuba given the royal treatment. It is the first direct commercial flight from Tampa to Havana in decades.
At this time, we'll go ahead and start our general boarding.
I was with the 175 people, 50 of which were Southwest employees and their guests who boarded that jet at 6 o'clock this morning. The historic nature of the day not lost on those here. How exciting is it to be able to travel to Cuba now on a commercial flight instead of a charter?
¿Estás contenta por el commercial flight que hicieron ahora?
Yes.
Very happy.
The flight was roughly an hour along the journey like any other flight, except for the Cuban hats and the commemorative postcards in each seat. A moment so significant, the CEO of Southwest came to be a part.
We stand for freedom at Southwest. We try to keep our costs low so we can keep our fares low, and all of our employees believe in making flying affordable, and this is kind of the epitome of that.
For the Bay Area, the new Cuban connection is a welcome addition, though other airlines already beat them to the punch in other cities.
To welcome you to Havana, Cuba.
But then there came the landing, the cheers, the joy, jubilation, the end of one era, they hope, and the beginning of a new one.
It's one of the most exciting trips because every year we pay amount unbelievable. Now it's comfortable. We can take it back and forth. $149. That's real.
Yeah, that's
cheap.
And on the ground in Cuba, dancing in the streets. Most here oblivious to the major airline change that happened in the Bay Area, but dancing nonetheless. You can tell that there's a very different feel in this city since Fidel Castro died. Of course, there were 9 days of mourning that had to take place here, so it's a very different feel. The city itself has opened up, I should say, a lot more, and music is starting to play again, and people are moving about the city again, so things are getting a lot back to the way that they used to be in Havana, Cuba. Rod Carter, News Channel 8. Now back to you.
And Rod will be bringing us reports from Cuba through tomorrow. He's going to return Wednesday, so be sure to stay tuned to News Channel 8 to get the latest updates on Rod's historic trip. And our own Rod Carter was one of those passengers. He joins us now from Havana.
And good evening from Havana, Cuba. People who want to come here to Havana, say visit places like the Hotel Nacional, have an easier way to do it from Tampa. There is now a direct flight that started today, a commercial flight that'll bring you straight to Havana. Jenny Castro is from Odessa and is visiting Cuba for the very first time.
Being amazing is better than what I expected, to be honest.
Although she didn't fly Southwest on today's inaugural direct flight to Havana, she did fly commercially and is glad to see the decades-old ban come to an end.
Of course! And I know for sure that a lot of people in Tampa will come. That's a guarantee.
Early this morning, I joined 175 other people on that flight headed for Havana. Before takeoff, it was a fantastic farewell, a send-off that brings in change. And it brings people to enjoy Cuba night or day, like Will Daniel and Todd Weil, both from Tampa, who came to town because of Southwest and because it was now affordable and fast.
That was the reason we came now. This is my 4th time here, and I think what I wanted to do now is see it before it kind of became mainstream.
The flight from Tampa to Havana is about an hour long. And once on the ground today, people cheered, there was joy, and then they walked off the plane and into history. For Penny, who left today, it was a perfect time to visit. And with Southwest now flying directly, it's something she's going to do more often, following advice she's heard for years.
They always say that Cuba is beautiful, and it's a place that you must know. So.
And by the way, Southwest Airlines joins a handful of other airlines that are already doing direct flights to Havana, Cuba, and other parts of Cuba as well. However, Southwest is the only airline that is flying out of Tampa International Airport. In Havana, Cuba, Rod Carter, News Channel 8. Back to you.
Thank you, Rod, and he will be reporting from Cuba again tomorrow. You can watch for Rod's latest updates right here on News Channel 8.
This morning, he talks to one passenger about why he took the trip.
And good morning from Havana, Cuba. It's been 24 hours since we boarded the first direct commercial flight from Tampa International Airport here to Havana. And I caught up with several people who were on that flight who are still here in Havana, came down for just a few days. In fact, one of the people I talked to said they took a trip here just because Southwest was offering that flight and because they wanted to get a chance to see what Havana looked like before, he says, things will start to change.
That was the reason we came now. This is my 4th time here, and I think what I wanted to do now is see it before it kind of became mainstream. But I think the fact there's a Southwest flight, there's a JetBlue flight, makes it so simple to come to. I mean, why not try it?
And when people arrived here in Havana, they found a different Cuba than they would have found just a week ago when the country was in a mandated mourning period for the death of Fidel Castro. Right now, a lot of vibrancy has returned to the city, and things sort of seem to be back to the way they used to be. In Havana, Cuba, Rod Carter, News Channel 8. Hey, good evening from Havana. One of the places that a lot of tourists like to come is here. This is Plaza de Armas. And as you can see, there's a tour group here. And there's a lot of goods you can buy, a lot of books and that sort of thing. But we caught up today with a couple who is actually from Tampa. And they didn't come to the touristy areas. They instead decided that they were going to take a bike tour. All right, take a look at it. We caught up with them along the streets inside some of the neighborhoods here in Havana. And they just got married, actually. They got married in Key West and decided they were going to come here to Cuba. So they got on Airbnb and found a bike tour to go on that.
Well, we just got here last night, so it's very colorful, a lot of culture, a lot of people hanging out on the streets, very cool.
And so they're going to be here for a few days. Now, coming up tonight on News Channel 8 at 5, we're going to catch up with some more folks from the Bay Area. Actually, it's a tour group, and it comprises of a lot of folks from across the United States. But we speak with one woman who is from Tampa and talk about taking their tour and their visit outside of the city of Havana. We'll tell you all about that coming up later tonight at 5. Back to you guys. And good evening again from Havana, Cuba. If you ever get the opportunity to come here, you'll notice that there are a lot of statues sprinkled throughout the city of Havana, and they're all over the place talking about the history of the city. But if you get the chance, you should venture outside of the city. In fact, I caught up with a group today called International Partnerships and Ventures in Education, and they took a trip to Matanzas City. And on that trip, they're going to go through a slave museum and take a look at some of the other history of the Cuban people. And I caught up with one woman in particular, Miss Maxine Hayes, who's actually from Tampa, and she told me about why it's important for her to be able to do this on her very first trip to Cuba, why she thinks everyone, if they get an opportunity, should come here.
It's been fantastic, Rod. It's been great. We got in yesterday morning, and everything has been just unbelievable. The people have been warm. The accommodations have been great. And when we got to Havana, it was like time just stopped. You know, it's unbelievable. You've heard about it, but you can't imagine until you actually see it.
Hopefully we'll be able to see, in fact, some pre-Castro sentiments and post-Castro, how people are feeling about the passing of Fidel Castro and what their hopes and aspirations are for the future.
And coming up tonight at 6, we're going to kind of take you out of the tourist areas and take you on a driving tour of some of those great classic cars throughout the area. I'm Rod Carter, Havana, Cuba. Now back to you.
Tonight, he takes us to an iconic part of Havana that visitors won't want to miss.
Hey, good evening, guys. Of course, when people think of Cuba, one of the first things they think of are these beautiful classic cars. So today, we thought we would hop in one of the convertibles and go out for a tour of Havana.
Yeah, this is Plymouth, 1955, yes.
Dania Perez Javin has been driving this old 55 Plymouth for a few years now.
I don't work all time to taxi driver.
She gives tours to visitors in Havana and took me around town today.
Because it's a place interesting, have the history, it's the government.
Dania has been working since she was 12 years old, first working for the government, and then she switched careers and became a veterinarian, and then she became a driver.
And I like to driver. Yeah, I like it. Driver, okay? Not taxi. But it's the opportunity, it's better for my profession.
The driving tours and the classic cars are a big business here in Havana.
Viva Cuba!
It's a chance for these drivers to share all of Havana. For Dania, just a snapshot of the Cuba that she knows and loves.
But I say right now it's good business working in this job because it's better. The tourists over here in this country is good for the government.
Now, most of these tours cost anywhere from $30 to $40, and you can actually get a classic tour around the city, or you can take it outside of the city and get some of the different areas that you may not necessarily see. Either way, I'm telling you, it's a very educational experience, and I personally learned a lot. In Havana, Cuba, Rod Carter, News Channel 8.
And Rod will continue to report for us from Cuba throughout the night. Be sure to watch News Channel 8 at 7 and 11 tonight. Rod will head back to Tampa tomorrow.
Tonight, Rod shows us the nightlife of the city.
And good evening from Havana, Cuba. Since we first got here yesterday morning on the first direct commercial flight from Tampa to Cuba on Southwest, we've showed you all the sights and the sounds during the day. Tonight, we wanted to show you just how beautiful and alive this city can be at night. Not just the beautiful lights that you see behind me, but some of the sounds that you get here in Havana. When the sun goes down, Havana comes alive again. Shops open, and it seems there's music on nearly every corner.
You know, people come for that.
Yosniel Cabos Valbuena is a tour guide in Havana. He told me the energy and the vibrancy of this part of Havana after dark is unparalleled.
I always suggest him to stay in Havana at night because there's a lot more to do.
One place he says tourists love and is a must-try is the Floridita. It was Ernest Hemingway's hangout and the original home of the daiquiri. But as festive as it is here now, it wasn't always this way. Just 2 weeks ago, when Fidel Castro died, a mandated 9 days of mourning, the music and the dancing stopped. The city, for the most part, fell silent.
That actually shocked a lot of people because people who planned a trip to Cuba and they were hoping to find the live music in the streets.
But tonight, the music is back. The joy is back.
You got the combination of good weather, a good mojito, and a good music, and then you visited one of the most crowded and visited, street in Havana.
And there's a spring and people step again. And that tour guide told me, too, that it's not just the city of Havana. You can actually travel outside of Havana and find some amazing things at night and during the day throughout the entire country of Cuba. In Havana, Rod Carter, News Channel 8, back to you.
Thanks, Rod. You can watch all of his stories from Cuba this week. We've put a link on the homepage of WFLA.com.